Welcome back to this ATM ITIC summit, virtual summit. It's now time for a very timely discussion on promoting gender equality in the Middle East tourism industry. And I'd like to welcome as moderator to Barkathunnisha Abu Bakar, who is founder and director, Elevated Consultancy and training co-founder, World Women Tourism. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rajan. Good afternoon to everybody from Singapore, and good morning, good evening to wherever you are in the world. My name is Nisha, and I'm a spirited campaigner, I would say, of women's empowerment. And my passion is in harnessing the growth potential of women through capacity building, education, and training, and therefore a co-founder of World Women Tourism. So before I go into the objectives of today's panel, give you a little bit of a background to this topic, is that we know that tourism has been regarded as a significant driver of women's socio-economic empowerment. And compared to other sectors, tourism provides more opportunities for women's employment, entrepreneurship, as well as leadership. According to World Bank, with effective policies, strategies, and tourism can be a powerful development tool to close the gender gaps in societies. So there have been many, many advancements in the empowerment of women in tourism globally, but many are still lagging behind in terms of economic opportunities, social mobility, access to financial and other resources, and employment rights and privileges. Particularly in the report by United Nations, which is a special report of Middle East, we have found that the women continue to lag behind other regions in the world with respect to women's agency and socio-economic participation. So as mentioned earlier, this is the right time to talk about this, because some of the reports in the pandemic had shown that the pandemic has a regressive impact on women's trajectory and socio-economic advancement. So what we like to do in this panel, we have the three objectives. Number one, to identify the current status of gender empowerment or gender equality in the Middle East tourism region. Number two, to highlight some challenges that are evident in the tourism industry that inhibits gender equality and empowerment, and also to explore some of the policies, strategies, and best practices from the region and globally for a more gender diverse and inclusive tourism industry, particularly in the post-pandemic world. So it's my honor and pleasure to have five so inspiring and empowering women. And let me just take the privilege to briefly introduce them. And when we talk to each and every one of them, I will go into further details of who they are and what they do. So first we have Nikolina. She's the Member of Parliament at the Bulgarian National Assembly and the former Minister of Tourism of Bulgaria. She has expertise in financial management and legal frameworks, which makes her a very influential advisor and a policy maker to the government. Next, we have Maribel, who is the Senior Vice President of the World Travel and Tourism Council. Prior to joining WTTC in 2014, Maribel has accumulated more than 20 years of experience in sales, marketing, communication, and commercial experience in both the aviation as well as the hospitality sectors. Next, a very impressive panelist, Sharihan. I'm so happy to meet you here. A highly impressive background as a hotelier at various established hotel chains for more than 40 years. And I think you have broken the glass ceiling to where you are at the moment. And I think you have received, we see that you have received several accolades as the best general manager of the UAE. And also you have been involved in training and capacity building of the tourism, trade, and hospitality industry over there. And next is a really, really fantastic colleague of mine and friend, Myra Isaacs. She is a destination expert in influencer for more than 25 years, and she brings immense international knowledge, and I think we will be benefiting a lot from her insights. Besides assisting several tourism boards and local governments with their destination development plans, she is now the CEO of WTFI, World Tourism Forum Institute, that envisions reshaping economies through tourism-related infrastructure, investments, creating jobs and driving diversity and sustainability. Finally, we'll be joined later by Associate Professor Catheryn Khoo, another really close friend and colleague of mine. She's an international expert on women and children in tourism, and she has published extensively on women in tourism. And she is also an editor-in-chief of an international journal, Tourism Management Perspective. She's also the WTO's regional expert for the 2018 Global Report of Women in Tourism. And we're going to be speaking more about this later as we move on in the panel. Okay, ladies, are you ready?
Yeah.
Everyone's ready? Okay, here we go, right? The first thing, we are going to anchor the conversation based on the 5 global themes that were established in the Global Report on Women in Tourism, namely employment, entrepreneurship, leadership, education, and community as being keys to women's empowerment in tourism. So the very first question, I'm going to pillar it on the employment aspects of women in the tourism industry. So the tourism industry is highly regarded as a major source of employment and pathway for inclusive development. And when women are gainfully employed, they not only significantly improve their own lives, but also uplift their families, community, and the society. In fact, the 2015 McKinsey report established that there's a potential gain of USD $2.7 trillion and a 47% boost in GDP by 2025 if women had access to the same economic opportunities as men. However, the reports are showing that there are several challenges and impediments for the gainful employment of women in the global tourism industry, particularly in the Middle East region. So, Sharihan, I would like to extend this question to you. You had a stellar career and progression in the tourism and hospitality industry in the Middle East. In addition to many other achievements, you have been the first female Emirati general manager in hospitality. And of course, you know, some of the other accolades as the best general manager for UAE and continent. Now, could you share professionally and personally, what are some of the challenges that you face to break the glass ceiling, and how did you overcome this? And how can women in the Middle East avail themselves to the opportunities that are available in the tourism industry?
Yeah, thank you, Nisha, and good afternoon to everybody. Now, I'll just shed the light on where I am, and we've got this fantastic and knowledgeable visionaries who are on the panel today who would share a global perspective as well. Now, the situation I've had is being an Emirati, but not just that, but living in the UAE in the top context of an environment that separates itself slightly from the region in its progression. So historically, the UAE has been known, part of the GCC, but also in the region to be pro-women and pro-women empowerment across the field. Giving you a trajectory before getting into where I am today is, looking at the leaders and the leadership in the UAE, how we've come so far historically, since the 1930s with the discovery of oil, then to its unity. So we are having our ministries and our federal national councils actually led by 50% women. And that also includes in the ministerial levels, a Ministry of State, and also a lot of initiatives that are being projected under the UAE Gender Balance Council, and it's a federal entity that actually imposes and designs initiatives, programs, and develops initiatives for all government sectors to implement and narrow the gender gap issues, and also support them in terms of policies and how to make it possible for women to take up the role. Now, we know so much about hospitality and its traditional forms. It's always been a male-dominant industry. I think that hasn't changed much. It has changed a little bit, and we've seen that in the past 10 years across the globe, but also in the region. Now, I started nearly 14 years ago, and I moved from aviation to enter hospitality. Now, entering the industry that contributes to a significant global GDP of 10.4%. And, according to ILO, we're looking at 55 to 70% of women who are actually working in either hotels or service industries had the opportunity of equal pay, equal opportunity, and giving them a stance in leadership positions started earlier. We can see a significant growth in economic development as well. So going back to my history, luckily living in the UAE, and UAE being quite progressive in the region, I had to grow through the ranks. So there is no easy way for a woman in any industry, and particularly a male-dominating industry, be it aviation or hospitality, travel and tourism. You have to earn your stripes, and it's always more difficult because you've got to prove yourself a lot more. And along the way, you will work with a leader who believes in that, who believes that there has got to be a gender perspective of things, because women play a significant role, not just in their vision or management design, but also what they can contribute. And, I think when women are in charge, they're not just in charge of the place, but they always factor in a lot of the socioeconomic aspects of things and the empathy part of things. And, a lot of people talk about gumption, and a lot of that comes with women leadership styles or management or decision-making styles. So I started from wearing a chef jacket 14 years ago and worked all the way up to becoming a general manager. And it was tough, because coming from an environment that still holds traditional mindsets, the Arabic mindset of the industry, of what it is and what does it mean for a woman to actually hold a position, what does it mean to work in hotels, and to break through that norm and to watch as the years evolve, and as the support of leadership, and that comes through government policies, we've seen that change how Emiratis and how the region actually looks at the prospective hospitality from a different eye. It is a career, and it's a career for a lot of great people to excel at. And being the industry with a significant role of providing jobs for now, it used to be in the past, now, and also looking forward into the future, it's got a great potential to bring in more women and encourage more women to be part of that.
Thank you, Sharihan. I think you've raised really some two important points that I picked up. One is that the establishment of macro policies or national policies that got to be in place to support it. And there are, of course, differences in the different countries within the region. And secondly, I think you talked about leadership and mentors that were instrumental towards you, elevating yourself in this industry. And we're going to pick up on that shortly. And it's interesting that you mentioned that you were in aviation and hospitality as well, because I'm going to pose that next question to Maribel, because the regional report on women in tourism in the Middle East indicated that the majority of the women employed in the tourism labor force are found working in the hospitality sector, so restaurants and hotels. And there are vertical and horizontal gender segregation in the vocations in the industry. For instance, we see a lack of female tour guides jobs, not only in your region, but we see that in the Maldives, for example, or Sri Lanka, Bhutan, where I do a lot of work, and we see that happening. And at the same time, you see less women in senior decision-making jobs as well. And the contribution factors seem to be, in addition to gender norms, it's also the gender-based discrimination in the recruitment practices for certain jobs. So, Maribel, what do you think? How do you think governments in the private sectors in the destination, the Middle East, can create and promote diverse job opportunities to enhance, equality?
Before I answer to your question, thanks for inviting me today. It's not a question only to be tackled in the Middle East. It's a question to be tackled at a worldwide level, because 54% of travel and tourism industry employ women, okay, which is a lot. It's because the rest of the sector is 39%. That is a good news. Another good news is that when it comes to public sector, ministers, it's a 23% versus the rest, which is 21%. The bad news, and the bad news not only for the Middle East, but the entire world, is that less than 5% of the leadership positions are supported by women. That is a super bad news. When you go, for example, to places like the US, 1 out of 4 women are occupied a top role. So that is not a question of education, training, is more than that. Okay, so there's a lot of studies that are demonstrating that women get super quick to middle management roles, but then they are stuck in the middle. What do we have to do, not only in the Middle East, but at worldwide level, to make sure that women are able to join top leadership positions? And it's a question that we have to all of us answer, not only the private, but the public sector. What are the policies? We have a lot of ideas, how to promote sponsorship, putting gaps or talking to universities, allow that 50% of the world are coming and supporting the other 50% of the world. But we need to work together to promote that, because otherwise it's going to be very, very complicated. And the sad situation is, if we continue like that, and it's a report that was just recently released by the WEF, the gender gap is going to be closed only in 135 years. In 2020, it was 99 years, okay? The time we will take to be at the same level, women and men. Now, because of the pandemic, and we can talk about that a little bit later, because how it affected women, is 135 years. Do you have time for it? I don't have time for it. None of us have time for it now. So it's a little bit bigger than this discussion of only in Middle East and only in Europe, whatever. It's a question of how can we work together, women and men, public and private sector, to make sure that they have 50% of the population is equally represented. Because there are studies that say that being inclusive, being diverse, putting minorities in your company, it will give you a 20% of results in your bottom line. So it's not only about diversity, it's about as well efficiency in companies.
Thank you, Maribel. I think one of the important points that you highlighted is not just about the government. I think there needs to be a close cooperation with the private sector. Very often, I've seen in certain countries, they leave it to the government to push agendas. But I think if it is steered also by associations at the grassroots levels, as well as the private sector to drive this agenda, it works far better, than government solely pushing the national agenda for gender inclusivity. Thank you so much.
Don't worry.
Yeah, thank you. And I would like to touch a little bit on entrepreneurship here in addition to employment. And Sumaira, I think you're the best one I could direct this question to, because I think as a CEO of WTTC, where you are steering and pushing for investment, especially in the Middle East region, one of the things that we see is that tourism is a potential industry, right, which has got ample opportunities for entrepreneurship for women, particularly in a region that has been characterized with high unemployment levels, right? So you have micro enterprises, home-based crafts, community-based tourism businesses. So, and it also allows for, minimal startup capital, flexible working hours, right? And you can work from home. However, many literature out there has stated that women face three significant challenges. Number one is the access to finance, and that has been ranked as number one in many research out there, right? Number two, building business networks where they could collaborate and look at procurement and marketing. The next is the ability to bring their businesses internationally. So there is a significant gap that we see between the credit that women entrepreneurs need and the finance they actually have received. So Sumaira, tell us, how can governments and private sectors funding organizations create and strengthen the support ecosystems for women's financial inclusion and entrepreneurship? And I give an example, like, to extend the venture capital or improve the regulatory constraints. And what is WTFI doing to support this agenda?
Thank you so much, Nisha, for having me here and with this esteemed panel. It's lovely to meet all these wonderful, powerful ladies. So I want to start off by saying that in Middle East, fewer than 1 in 10 tourism workers in the Middle East are women. Though this proportion is steadily increasing, and there's several initiatives that are being taken currently by some of the local governments. Saudi Arabia is one of them. Egypt is on the forefront, and as Sharihan just mentioned, UAE, the gender equality programs that they are currently running are extremely commendable. I also want to put out one more statistic, and to me it's a very important one, that 21% of tourism ministers today in the region are female. Okay, and as compared to 23% on a global level. So that's a very positive sign, and a lot of these 21% actually come from developing countries like Africa, in the continent of Africa. So it is being recognized as a sector that is women friendly, and I think more and more women are beginning to engage, and the governments are beginning to understand the value of this engagement and how they can support it. So the key, there have been a lot of studies being done on this, that and out of that, what has come through is that 8% of people employed in tourism in the region are women, compared to 16% in the overall economy of the region. At a global level, 54% of people employed in tourism are women, compared to 39% in the broader global economy. So the comparisons are there. Women are well educated, but they were not encouraged previously to enter the tourism workforce. It's exposure, it's travel, it's family handicaps, and it's your bigger community and network understanding that it is okay for women to leave homes. Of course, it was acceptable for them to work in banks and other sectors, but our sector is such that they do have to go away. They have to travel. They have to leave children behind. But here comes in the role of the extended families. I'm speaking from my experience, in Dubai, having raised 4 children. And when I had to, 30 years ago, had to get on flights, go on long trips and all, it's my extended family, whether that be your immediate family or in-laws or and so forth, who came to my rescue. So that actually is a big advantage that we have in the Middle East, and I think Sharihan will back me up on that, and it comes with the territory here. Coming back to the question of entrepreneurship and gender gaps in employment and entrepreneurship, okay? So the employment, self-employment and SME ownerships, women's participation is significantly lower than men across the region. There's a reluctance towards working in tourism, and I think that comes from a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding of the sector. And this is where, again, I think there's some of the government bodies, but also it's the private sector has to play a role. It's the educational institutions. We at World Tourism Forum Institute, we've realized that post-COVID, there's a real opportunity now to raise voice on these subject matters, where gender equality, women's engagement in travel and tourism sector. So we thought we need to create something, a platform that addresses that. And Nisha, you know that, we've just launched our hospitality school hat, which is hospitality, aviation, travel and tourism. And we engage your organization actually in there, because we put the women's issues and engagement on top of our agenda.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Sumaira. I know while training and skills development and knowledge is important, I think in our conversations through our summits and webinars, one thing that it goes back to the fundamentals of money. Women say we need the money to scale our business, right? Without that, how do we expand our business? How do we go internationally? So it still goes back to finance, and that's when I think women face really, really big challenges on the ground, to get access to finance and funding. So and also I think it's an interesting point that you talked about 21% or 23% of the in tourism industry of tourism ministers being present. And we have one esteemed Minister of Tourism, Nikolina, with us, and it's an honor and pleasure to have you here. And Nikolina, being the former Minister of Tourism in Bulgaria, we got a question that I want to ask you. Earlier we were talking about women being constrained in their access to human capital, financial capital, technology, and these are real issues on the ground, right? And so how do you think women can be empowered in the tourism value chain through gender responsive national strategies? I think you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Nisha, for this question. And I'm really very honored to be with you. And I'm sorry for my delay in connecting, but we are now in front of another election campaign. So I was suddenly stuck in our political party center. I have been a minister for tourism for 6 years. And before that, I was Minister of Transport, Information Technologies and Communication. Actually, I was the first female minister of the Ministry of Transport, which was really quite a big challenge. But in Bulgaria, in particular, our party and in our government, we were having almost equal, very good gender balance, equal men and women. From 19 ministers, 9 were women. So we were almost half, which actually only, I think, our party managed to deliver at that level. Then when we are talking about the tourism industry itself, also we have higher percentage of women that are employed in the entire tourism industry. Though on a managerial position, still the percentage is approximately 35 to 38, which is good and an average base, but not equal as it is when we talk about another lower positions like waitress or receptionist. I mean, on a managerial position in the sector itself, we still need to encourage more, I'm sorry, women to take part in the investing in tourism sector, to have opportunities for I'm sorry, opportunities for financing from the banks and all that. So in Bulgaria, actually, and in particular in our party, which is center-right, women have a much bigger advantage and also opportunity to run for higher position, and is given a chance. Really, we are, I think, from this perspective, a very good example. Although generally, And in the average in Bulgaria, when I read the recent analysis also of the European Commission that were made regarding the gender balance itself, we are on the average approximately from around 35%, I think, women that are in managerial positions, high level management, not middle one. So this is good, but I can share that I had quite a big challenges, not as a Minister of Tourism, but as a Minister of Transport, because it was which is really very well connected with the tourism, because transport and tourism, according to me, goes very well together, as one cannot exist without the other if we want to promote destination worldwide, so everyone can reach the other country by transport, and in particular by air transport. But it was really so unusual for the people that are working in the sector that they have a female minister, that for a month I was called Mr., not Miss. Mr. Minister, which was it was really one of my first impressions when I became Minister of Transport back in 2014. So, but I think from that year up to now, many things has changed, and women has proven that they deserve to be on high-level managerial positions, and that they can deliver. And actually, our job is much more difficult, because on one side, we have to take care of our families, which is somehow by default required. And on the other side, we have to perform and to prove that our skills are at the same level as if there is a man manager at the same position, which actually has to be admired. And I really admire what everyone everywhere in the world, and in particular in the Middle East, is doing, because it's really very, very difficult to combine both expectations, let's put it that way, from a family point of view, and also as regarding the business perspectives, regardless if it is in the private or in the public sector.
Sure. I think the positive statistics that you showed, in Bulgaria is a representation of a female minister in the tourism industry and in the transportation. And that's what research shows, that, data become positive in steering towards gender equality when it's represented by female ministers, when the strategies are put into place. So thank you so much for sharing. And I would like to move on. We just have Catheryn Cool joining us. Thank you, Catheryn, rushing through. Again, one of those mother, wife who has to rush between things and get here on time. That one of the things we have seen is that when it comes to education, right, we have been talking about the importance of training and education. And Catheryn, do you think that, you have been a gender studies expert and, also part of the 2018 Global Report of Women in Tourism. Do you think it is important to apply a gender focus when we design professional development training programs for women in the tourism sector? And how do you think this could be facilitated by the private sector or government, which is in charge of steering national training or education programs? You're on mute, Catheryn.
Thank you, Nisha. Thanks for that. And yes, it is what I confirm what Sumaira said before. I confirm what Sumaira said before about being a mother and a professional woman rushing through school orchestras and this meeting. But I'm glad you asked that question, because that question is something that is very passionate. It's a passion project of mine. And as someone who is very into training and providing training at the government and institutional levels, we have seen a lack of uptake on this application of a gendered lens on training and training content and training modules and the design of training. So it is really important, because at the moment, a lot of the the courses, training courses, are designed for everybody, but actually they're designed with very masculine characteristics and attributes in the whether it's in the design, in the delivery, and in the content. And it's the language of the training are also very gendered, as with tourism is very gendered. And so it's not gender neutral. And when it's not gender neutral and women have to attend this, they cannot identify or embrace the things that are taught to them that they're supposed to have. So we had a really good case study with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. With their funding, we were able to conduct a training needs analysis for women in Ecuador and Mexico, in the rural areas of Ecuador and Mexico, in order to help them, give them training to put their businesses on the global platform. And we didn't go in with a set of training modules that we picked up from the web or what's available from private sector, private training companies, but we did in-depth training analysis with them, training needs analysis with them, and found that, for example, they, as much as they wanted to learn all this technology stuff, it's not the the things that we think they want to learn. It's not the SEOs and the things like that, but they wanted, for example, very important for them was to have a key member of their family who support their technology in business with them at the training, so that they can go back and sustain that kind of learning over time. So what we did in our training, we designed it to include their support person at the training. Nisha, there's so many elements to this gendered, to applying this gendered lens in the training, and every element changes the direction, the effectiveness of the training, and the meaning of the training for the women, and the impact it has on their businesses. And in this short time, I can't go into the details of it, but that was one example.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Catheryn. I wish we could have more training which is gender sensitive and bring that into organizations. I want to move on to Sharihan, because one of the impediments that the Middle East tourism industry face when looking at the lack of women wanting to enter is the image of the industry as not pro women, Can you share with us, Sharihan, what could be done to better position the tourism industry as an attractive career and employment choice in the Middle East, so that more women could enter the tourism force and represent more gender diversity and equality, and perhaps national public education or media campaigns like the way that we do here in Singapore, a lot of that actually, so that more women and more the population would enter our industry. So over to you, Sharihan.
Thank you so much, Nisha. And just quickly, I think your question sums up every element that Sumaira, Nikolina, Catheryn, Maribel, and yourself have spoken about earlier. Now, it is policy. We have seen government and government agenda, and looking towards the 2030 agenda, it is paramount after the tourism and travel industry being considered as the biggest employer, and also economic growth is a key factor to it, then what's going to happen in the private sector? And most hotels actually fall in the private sectors, and like the service industry, restaurants as well. Getting it to become a popular career path, I think for me and for a lot of people in the region, is actually starting at school level. And that's where, not just the awareness of the industry as a career path, we see more women in the UAE and our region in particular entering armed forces than hospitality, because hospitality was not talked about in the early age. Again, there have been certain connotations to it not being the most positive for women, the most open to having women in leadership positions, but that's changed significantly over the past 10 years. And with more efforts and we need a lot of efforts from a lot of organizations and initiatives coming from all of you, pushing the private sector, the education sector, talking to the ministries, but then with the support of the UN SDGs and UN WTO, we see a lot of changes happening. It is evolving. It will take a little bit longer than other sectors, I believe, but we see that shift. And also, we are seeing more people prone towards post-COVID-19, moving from a degree education to skills and technical vocational education. And that's key, because if hospitality and tourism is the biggest employer, and with a lot of women and in general people, a lot of supporting mothers no longer in employment, because unfortunately the traditional mindset is man is the breadwinner in the industry. So a lot of the positions during the pandemic were put on hold for women, but resumed for men. Now that changes the whole perspective. So like you mentioned earlier, there might be a reverse instead of us going towards achieving some of the factors of the SDG. And when you solve, SDG 8, 12, and 17, and, SDG goal 5, all of them have gender equality, but also tourism as a factor to solving the global agenda, but also solving the problems.
Absolutely.
So I think starting at the core is starting in the educational institution, having people and, women who force the policymakers and decision makers to see a different light.
Definitely. I totally agree with that, Sharihan. And Maribel, I wanted to ask you, as an acting CEO of WTTC, as well as a president of Women Leading Tourism, what can we do? We cannot forget the other gender. What can we do to enlist men as partners and champions of change to create more inclusive spaces for women to thrive in the tourism industry? And we have about 1 minute to round up. So over to you, Maribel. Let's hear from you.
Oh my God, that is very challenging. 1 minute. But first, what I wanted to say is that women, we are very collaborative. We don't see the ones, our peers or our colleagues, as only transactional. We see everything as from a collaborative perspective. And this is always a very high level way of relation ourselves with the others. From the point of view of, of leading an organization which is related to women, and of course within WTTC, it's all about making sure that there is always a communication between the public and the private sector, including academia. And totally agree with my colleague before talking about that. And that's why we have created an initiative which is called the Cancun Women Declaration. We are inviting you all to be signatories of it. More than 100 companies has already agreed to commit with those principles, which is working with the public sector to do the right policies so the private sector can implement it, because they have been told and they have been invited, because there are incentives, or there is the platform for them to be able to do that. And as well, of course, academy, because leadership is something you are not born with. You have to learn from it. And it has to come from the education. And when you have a proper and talented, people educated, whatever they are, women or men, things are going to be much better. For us, it's all about being collaborative, cooperating, and putting all the links together to make sure that we are here, for a future, for a better world, which is all about. And tourism is very inclusive. You can start working as a bellman or a bellwoman and end up being a director, which is one of the best assets that we can provide in our sector.
Thank you so much, Maribel. And I think even at Sumaira's HATT, you have men driving the need for a women's tourism program that we are so heartened, isn't it, Sumaira? So thank you, everyone. I'm getting prompts to say that we have to run. I really wish we had a whole conference where we could speak about this, perhaps the next one. But thank you, Sumaira. Thank you, Sharihan, Nikolina, Catheryn, as well as Maribel. It's been a pleasure being with you on this stage, always very inspiring and empowering. And I think it's just likewise to every single listener out here. My very best to all of you, and stay safe, and thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.